Anyways, this is a really hard topic. It's so real. Holy Spirit, hopefully he'll take care of the rest. Hi, my name is Sister Alicia, and this is Ascension Presents. In his letters, Paul the Apostle once said that the sufferings of this life are nothing compared to the glory that's going to be revealed in us. And to be honest with you, I have found that really hard to believe sometimes. How is it that my sufferings are nothing compared to the glory that's going to be revealed, which I can't even really scratch the surface of? And I'm pretty sure Paul was right because he's a saint and he wrote that and he had a profound experience or encounter with Jesus. But how does it make sense in my own life when there's so much suffering? There's just so much suffering. And I think about my personal life and the experiences I've had growing up as a child. My family was great, but there was a lot of hard stuff in our home. I can especially remember when I was 13 years old and it was a Saturday morning and my dad came into the room and he said, "Your Uncle Bobby is dead." And my mind was blown. Like, how could that be real? And it turned out that it was true, that he was dead. And he was my favorite uncle, and everything I loved about cooking and exploring science and all that was from him because he was the one grown-up in my life that always paid attention when I was around and was always interested in what I was doing, not like interested in what all the other grown-ups were doing. And to like pour salt on the wound because of the deep sorrow in the family, I wasn't even allowed to go to his funeral. So for years, I knew in my head that my Uncle Bobby was dead, but in my heart, I just still couldn't believe it, even when I went to the cemetery and knelt at his grave. How do you make sense of that? That was so hard. It was so hard. And probably for you too, you have a lot of memories like that, where you just didn't get it. Why was it so hard? And why did I have to suffer so much? And why did God take that person from me that I loved so much and who loved me so much? It's so hard. And yet, somehow in all of it, we're not alone. And I think that if we look at Jesus, we come to realize that it actually is true, that we actually are not alone. I'm thinking about one of my favorite saints, Saint Therese of Lisieux. You might know her. You might have heard of her. You might have read some things that she wrote. But a lot of people are really shocked to discover that in those last months and year and a half or so of her life, she literally felt nothing. Like on the inside, she felt abandoned by God. On the outside, she was suffering so much. She had tuberculosis. She was in tremendous pain. Eventually, she couldn't participate in the life of her sisters, and she just suffered. And she suffered, and she suffered some more. And yet, in all of it, she never lost faith. She believed deep in her heart that she wasn't alone. But how is that possible, to not be alone when it's so hard? And again, Jesus is the answer. When I think about the hardest moments in my life, it really feels like being at the foot of the cross. Like you're there and it's really dirty and there's blood and there's rocks and people are screaming and yelling and it's chaotic. And you're looking up and there's like this person hanging on the cross and he's quiet and he's just breathing deeply. And there's this total disaster of his body, like beaten and scourged and whipped. And he's really suffering. But I also feel like I'm really suffering. And that's when it makes sense, because he is really suffering and because I am really suffering. But because that's true, that's why the glory is far greater. Sometimes I imagine myself with Mary and the apostles and the women on Holy Saturday, just sitting and waiting and knowing something's coming, but not knowing exactly what that means. The silence and the pain and the sorrow. And I imagine myself just placing my head on Mary's lap and just trusting with her that there's something far greater coming, greater than that deep loss of Jesus. And it comes on the third day. I imagine myself as Mary, just like weeping by the tomb, and then noticing that it's empty. And then finding in the garden Jesus. And he speaks my name, and he knows me. And that is why I know that I am not alone in my suffering. It's true.